Hey there, I'm Nate Baruch, Senior Director of Customer Acquisition here at Bandwidth. My role is to help cloud comms providers find a blueprint for expanding internationally. There's a lot more to expanding internationally than simply finding the right call coverage and call termination. In this video, I'll take you through 4 strategic considerations or things you need to keep in mind while breaking into new markets. The first topic is marketplace approach. And what I mean by that is not necessarily addressable market. What I mean is to understand your customers, who they are, and how you'll sell to them. For example, will you be selling to your existing customer base that happens to sit in other countries, or are you actually looking to procure new customers in that market you're looking to go into? The next thing to keep in mind is whether you'll build global capabilities first and then find customer interest, or vice versa. Keeping in mind that if you go the latter route, you're more likely to run into product considerations where you're in a time crunch, so you might have to make some compromises. The next thing to decide is what your target markets will be and the timelines around them. Every market looks so different from a regulatory perspective. I cannot stress that enough. So it might be a case that some countries are easier to go into from a regulatory perspective, while some are much more complex. Oftentimes, this can help drive your roadmap in terms of where you want to go, kind of taking the low-hanging fruit first. So sometimes that complexity can drive the markets that you want to go into. Topic number 2 is regulations and compliance. Regulations vary heavily by country. That being said, if you do take the time to do things right, rather than operating in gray areas, so to speak, it will actually become a long-term competitive advantage for you. The main areas to grasp here within this category are 1, reselling and sub-allocation limitations. So for example, do you need to be notified with the regulator in country in order to operate services there? 2 would be local address requirements. A lot of countries require that you understand who your customer is and what their information might be. So getting an address, getting proof of that address. The third topic is emergency services. Most markets do require that you will have to provide emergency services capabilities along with your voice services. So that's something you'll want to look for with a partner. And lastly, taxes. This is something you'll want to work with your tax advisor on, someone who's more familiar with your specific situation to understand the landscape and what this might mean for your business. Our third topic is tech stack and infrastructure. Starting off from a development perspective, determine whether you'll be building on top of a third-party application or building this out in-house. I will say one thing to caveat here is we speak to customers very often that have built on top of a third-party platform and end up scaling out of that. So it doesn't really help future-proof their company, and it's a lot of effort when they have to make that shift over. So just something to keep in mind there. The next thing is to ask yourself several product questions in terms of what will you need to offer to your customers. Will you need local emergency services? Will you need porting capabilities? National termination, international termination, and which number types? And that actually brings us into another point, which is what's prevalent in one country might not necessarily be as prevalent in another. For example, mobile numbers in certain countries, or MMS capabilities. For example, that's very large in the US, but you don't really see it as prevalent in other areas. Next, you'll need to map out your infrastructure and what that will look like. This will have a big effect on call quality. If you are expanding into another continent, think about how you're going to be handling calls and call flows local to that area. Will you have them traverse the ocean? Will you have them stay local? It's going to be a big differentiator in terms of call quality. So just something to keep in mind with the latency, having to go from infrastructure across continents. A couple other points to consider are what your failover options will be, as well as whether you'll have direct interconnections with your partners or whether public internet will suffice. And if the latter, what does secure comms look like? Do people offer TLS and SRTP? Our last topic is choosing the right partner or partners to work with. Everything that we've discussed so far in this video plays a part into this. That being said, what it really comes down to is how can my partner make my life easier and help me get to market faster? You essentially have 2 main options here. One is to work with a local incumbent partner in each country that you're looking to expand into. This is great from a cost perspective, it's great from a quality perspective. The only downside is once you move into 3 or 4 markets, this becomes pretty unsustainable over time. It's just a lot to manage. The other option is to work with a global provider. The important part to note here though is that not all global providers are made equal. Some prioritize their national operator status, some prioritize just getting to market as quickly as possible in as many countries as possible, and sacrifice some of the quality. So the main thing to ask your partner is, how important is quality, and how do you go about building out your network? Understanding where they aggregate services versus where they're a national operator will help you determine what the quality might be. Ultimately, if there is a lot of aggregation in service, that's going to lead to call latency, it's going to lead to longer troubleshooting times. Both will have a detriment on your service. On the topic of quality, it's also important to note if they have the capability to offer MOS scores or any other way to measure that quality of the calls. Other questions to ask your partner are, how quickly can you scale with them? Is there real-time delivery of services? Is there a portal? And also, is there an API capability if that's something that you're looking for to build into your service? Launching into new international markets may seem daunting, but can also be rewarding. And with the right partner, you can also turn this complexity into a competitive advantage. At Bandwidth, we're here to help you scale your cloud communications.